Bob's Burgers Season 12 ended a couple weeks ago, at least at the time I was writing this. And since I've done this super long video where I talked about, reviewed, and ranked every single episode of Bob's Burgers before the season, I figured that it might be a good idea to try and keep up with each new season of Bob's Burgers and have the list sort of grow and evolve as the series continues on. So let's go ahead and get into this. And really quickly, this is obviously your spoiler warning for Bob's Burgers Season 12. I won't spoil anything plot relevant to the movie, just maybe a passing comment or something, nothing major. But still, go see the movie if you haven't yet, it's really fun. And while we're here, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. I'm trying to hit 100,000 by the end of the year. And comment down below what you'd like to hear me talk about next, it definitely helps the algorithm not hate my channel. MANIC Pixie Crap Show. This is actually a pretty strong start to the season in all honesty. The A-plot revolves around Louise, Millie, Tina, and Jean at a Pixie promenade at the park. Millie is having Louise attend the Pixie promenade because she's been banned and wants Louise to get her a specific wand that she wants. Louise, of course, does her own thing instead, and the episode really decides to focus more in on how Louise actually feels about herself. Something that we really don't see that often in the show. We actually hear Louise kind of lament and face her own personality a bit. The fact that she's not into the traditionally girly stuff that many others her age are. It's actually a nice bit of internal reflection, and Tina helping her with that is also really nice. The B-plot has Linda being forced to deal with flowers that resemble a dog she knew that died in front of her when she was a child. The escalation and revelations of Linda's youth just getting sadder and sadder is kind of hilarious, as is the episode as a whole in all honesty. A very good start to the season. On the big list, see my other video to get a sense of everything, I'll place this currently at number 51, right between Tina and the Real Ghost and the Taking a Fun Time 1-2-3. Crystal Mess. I like this episode a lot less than the previous one. Maybe it's my general disdain for crystals. Maybe it's that I kinda wish that Mr. Frond and Gail were still dating. Maybe it's just the episode isn't anything fantastic. We've seen Tina give many speeches and presentations in class and in the school at large. This is one of the first times we've seen or heard about nerves during one of these presentations. So it, to me, feels a bit out of character for her. The pickling subplot is pretty forgettable as well. The jokes are okay, but overall it definitely feels like a weaker entry for the show. Currently at 206th on the list, right above Lobsterfest. The Pumpkining. This episode gives us a view into Gail and Linda's relationship back when they were in high school. After the two of them receive an ominous letter, they end up returning to the town they grew up in to figure out who sent them the letter. We know who smashed the pumpkins, it was Linda and Gail, but we don't know who else knows about it besides the sisters. So watching them try to unravel the mystery is fairly fun, but what I don't really like about this is the reveal that it was Gail's life coach who sent the letter, which, yes, they did mention at the beginning of the episode, but it almost feels like a cop-out, I guess. In the other plot, the kids are hanging around the restaurant while Bob gives out candy. It's a pretty forgettable subplot in all honesty. A pretty meh episode overall. Better than the last for sure, but nothing fantastic. I'll rank this at 162nd, just below Moody Foodie. Driving Big Dummy. This is a Bob and Teddy episode. It's really been a hot minute since we've had an episode that really focused in on their relationship. But what I don't really like about it is that it seems to take a step back. Like, we know they've decided they're friends by this point, but this episode has Bob getting more and more annoyed with Teddy as the two of them go on a much longer than it should be road trip to drop off a huge dummy head and pick up a new sink for the restaurant. I don't think the episode is funny enough to justify the contentious relationship between Bob and Teddy that we see here, but the subplot where the kids and Linda are in charge of the restaurant is definitely more interesting. It's actually something I've thought about in the past. How does the restaurant get by when Bob goes off to do something? Surprisingly well, apparently. At least when Linda can actually wrangle the kids into actually helping, that is. Not the worst of the season, but definitely not the best either. I'll put this at 195 on the list between Bye Bye Boo Boo and longtime listener First Time Bob. 7-TWEEN again. This is the first Jean-centric episode of the season, and honestly, it's a pretty weak entry. We've seen Jean be the most immature member of the Boucher family, but this episode has him regressing back to being a literal 7-year-old. It seems like a lot of relatively recent Gene plotlines have been with him dealing with his immaturity and him growing up, but I don't know if we've seen him regress this hard before. The Gretchen subplot is also super forgettable this go around. It's honestly not my favorite and is probably in the running for the worst of the season, maybe even the worst of the series. 206th, right below Sacred Cow. Beach, please. The kids are cleaning up a beach for volunteer day at school, but Louise ends up hatching and putting a plan into action to get her and all the kids free solo access to Wonder Wharf. What ends up happening is a bit of a showdown between Louise and Mr. Fish Odor, and it's honestly pretty fun to watch. These kinds of episodes are usually among the best in my opinion, where we get to see the more devious side of Louise and to see her try to match wits with someone even more devious. The B plot is really forgettable, not in a bad way or anything, it's just pretty unexceptional. A fun episode throughout, one without really any stakes, and I think that really works for it. 67th on the list, below Go Tina on the Mountain. Loft and BEDSLATION. It's not often that we see a permanent change in one of the show's settings. In this case, we're talking about the Belcher family apartment. Louise is trying to upgrade her bed, and Linda is trying to make up for her family never really doing anything like that when she was growing up. I think this episode is really sweet and wholesome. Linda, Tina, and Louise all trying and failing to build the loft bed is pretty funny. Maybe the funniest bit of an episode we've seen all season, to be honest. I also really like the subplot with Bob and Jean in the restaurant super late while a group plays Dungeons & Dragons. Seeing Bob and Jean support the new DM is super wholesome and feels exactly like what they would do. A good episode, 42nd overall, right below Gail making bobsled. Stuck in the Kitchen with You. Here is this season's Thanksgiving episode, and I'm not super blown away by what they did with this one. So we know that Bob is usually pretty stressed when it comes to Thanksgiving, because he takes cooking incredibly seriously. But this time is the first time we really hear that the rest of the family actively dislikes being in the kitchen with Bob while he's like this. And we see Louise trying to get out of cooking for the entirety of the episode, as well as Bob being a bit of a kitchen diva. That's not a recipe for a super fun and light episode, which are usually the best episodes of the series. The Linda subplot is forgettable, and the episode at large isn't too funny. A mid-tier episode, 173rd on the list, right above Synchronized Swimming. FOMO You Didn't. Tina is riding the D train. Like, surely they knew what they were doing with that, right? Anyway, she's borderline failing her photography class because she routinely doesn't really do her work, wants to hang out with the cool kids, i.e. Jimmy Jr. and the like, and she's just kind of not good at photography. Susmita tries to help her, she's really a pretty good friend, and there's a whole thing with a photo of the cool kids skipping school. It's not super interesting. Honestly, none of the three plot lines going on really grabbed me this go around. It's a forgettable episode, which is something I feel like I'm saying more and more as the seasons go on. 178th, right below Cheer Up, Sleepy Jean. Jean's Christmas Break. Okay, we're on to this season's Christmas episode. In this go around, it's a Jean-centric episode, and I do actually like what they do with this one. After Jean accidentally breaks his favorite Christmas record, the family does their best to try and find a replacement, and eventually they just end up recording their own version of the album. And while initially dismissive and not impressed by the cover album, Jean has a bit of a realization, and remixes the album and decides he actually really likes it. It's nice seeing Jean actually being appreciative and mature, and this episode really does tap into that loving nature that the Christmas episodes in particular seem to do really well. A pretty good episode, 78th overall, right between Mazel Tina and Tina Witch. Touch of Evaluations. It's evaluation time for the Wagstaff elementary teachers, and the fate of just who's going to get that special reserved parking spot is completely up to the students. And Louise has decided that she's going to use this opportunity to try and blackmail her way to a better grade. I actually really like this episode. It focuses in on the relationship between Louise and her teacher, Miss LeBons. Louise is obviously the problem student. She's smart, and Miss LeBons sees that and wants to encourage that. But Louise can't and won't be reined in by anyone or anything. It's an interesting dynamic, which we really haven't looked at too much in particular. And it's nice seeing that Miss LeBons really does recognize the potential Louise has, and that she's found the best way to get her to work. A really fun episode, 57th overall, just above Paraders of the Lost Float. Ferry on my wayward Bob and Linda. And now this season's Valentine's Day episode. The kids are planning on taking advantage of Valentine's candy going on sale, and Jen, the babysitter, being Jen. Jen, however, is strict with them for the first time ever, which is strange, and also only because she's inviting over a guy. Also, how old is this guy? How old is Jen? I guess I always assumed she was in like high school, but according to the wiki, she's in her 20s. Huh. Bob and Linda's plot is kind of a letdown. I was actually kind of looking forward to them rubbing elbows with wealthy restaurateurs, but they barely even get there and we never get to see it on our end. It's kind of disappointing, honestly. We've seen Bob kind of interact with restaurant owners who hate him, but not many who've got some respect for him or anything. It could have been interesting. 170th, above the unbearable likeness of Jean. Forget me not. Backstory for Teddy is something that we haven't typically seen in Bob's Burgers throughout the years. We got drip-fed a couple pieces of info here and there, but this is one of those rare episodes that really focuses on something in Teddy's past. In this instance, it's Teddy's time in the Navy, more specifically that time he fell off the boat, twice in one day. Teddy is facing down his past and the ridicule he's faced over the years, as the ship he was deployed on is decommissioned. None of the plots are anything on their own, but they do kind of add up to a pretty solid episode overall, 93rd on the list, below The Silence of the Louise. Video killed the Genio star. I really wish that the A and B plots in this episode were reversed. The briefcase and walnut bit is maybe one of the weirdest and funniest bits I've seen in the show in quite a while. And the Jean and Courtney music video A plot feels like it doesn't really go anywhere too fascinating. Like Jean's just upset about the song, but does the music video, then just kind of gets over it. It's really nothing to write home about, in all honesty. Is the moral of the story that sometimes it's okay to just listen to peer pressure? I don't think so, but it could certainly be interpreted as that. Another one I'm actually plugging into the 178th spot. Ancient Misbehavin'. Here's another one of those episodes where Louise faces off against the teachers of the school, or at least in this instance, the history teacher. Louise, regular-sized Rudy, and Millie are all counterfeiting these tokens that are given out in class and redeemed for prizes. It's pretty fun, and I'm actually kind of glad that Millie and Louise are on more of a friendly basis now. It really adds a lot of new possible storylines and dynamics, and these three characters are fun throughout the whole episode. The rest of the family is changing their sleeping arrangements, with Bob sleeping in the basement and Tina and Jean sleeping in bed with Linda. It's the lesser of the two plot lines, but that's fine in all honesty. A very passable episode, 157th currently, between All That Jean and A Fish Called Tina. Interview with a POP-POP-PIRE. This episode is in a bit of a weird place for me, because I do like one part in particular in this episode, but the vast majority of it isn't too great. It's one of those vignette episodes, but this time the main focus is Bob's father, Big Bob. The stories themselves aren't anything fantastic, but I do like the background we get on Big Bob and Bob's mom, which is nice to see, but I don't think that's really enough to pull this episode out of the lower/middle tiering where it currently sits in my mind. 195th, above I Bob Your Pardon. The Spider House Rules. This is the second episode just this season that kind of looks at how Louise perceives herself and her place among her peer group. But I don't think this one is quite as good as the season's premiere, and doesn't handle the same subject nearly as well. Anyways, Louise finds a spider in her room, the rest of the family wants to get rid of it, but Louise keeps it. It, of course, escapes, and the kids end up looking everywhere for it. It's an alright plotline. The B plotline, where Bob ends up in a texting group with a bunch of dads from the kids' school, is pretty fun and cute. It's nice seeing Bob reach out and try to make new friends every so often, even if he usually regrets the decision to go hang out with them immediately. And I like that they're definitely keeping the loft bed around. Nice touch. An above average episode, 85th overall, above Slumber Party. Clear and Present Ginger. Ginger is a character we've heard mentioned many times throughout the series. She's Linda's best friend, besides Bob, of course. And while we've gotten like kind of vague glimpses at someone who's probably Ginger, she's never actually shown up in an episode. And that still hasn't changed. And this episode is even written around her absence specifically. Linda invited her over, but it seems like she won't be able to make it. So Linda begins to spend the night with Gretchen and Gail, but then, of course, Ginger can make it, so Linda kicks them out. Kind of a crap thing to do, and Linda comes to that realization, and the four of them spend the night together. The B-plot focuses on a limo race thing with the rest of the family and Nat all teaming up. The two plots are so disconnected that it's almost jarring at times and gives the episode a bit of a weird feel as a whole, but the episode itself is pretty funny. Mid-tier for sure, below 3 Girls and a Wharfie at 104th on the list. A Sprout a Boy. I don't really like this episode. Gene is absolutely obsessed with this cat Tamagotchi type game, which, are those still a thing? Anyways, Bob is trying to get Gene to do his homework, and Gene just wants to play with his cat Tamagotchi. It's kind of annoying actually. I do like that by the end of the episode, Bob has a realization that Gene has his own things that he's interested in, much like Bob with cooking. But the problem being that the thing he was neglecting was his homework, which isn't great. The B-plot where Tina and Louise take over a kids ride thing outside a grocery store isn't anything great, and the whole episode is pretty forgettable. 214th on the list, just between Boys Just Wanna Have Fungus and Fingers Loose. Sauce Side Story. This episode gives us a look into parts of Linda's family that we haven't seen before, some of her extended family. And we get a small bit of backstory into the feud that the families had going on for generations at this point. So for Mother's Day, the kids and Gail decide that they're going undercover to try and get back Linda's grandmother's recipe. Nico is a fun character and he seems generally pretty chill, and it's nice seeing that the feud hasn't really affected the youngest members of the family. The Bob, Linda, and Teddy tattoo subplot is on the more boring side of things, and honestly just kind of drags the episode down a bit in my mind. I'll place this at 175th, right below Ferry on My Wayward Bob and Linda. Some Like It Bot Part 1, 8th Grade Runner. Okay, here's part 1 of the 2-part season finale. Tina has gotten this sweet new horse shirt and she's excited to show it off in class. And of course, Tammy and Jocelyn decide to talk crap about it on their local school news show thing. And they talk crap about a lot of people actually. Why would the school, especially Mr. Frond, allow this to air? So this starts kind of pushing Tina over the line a bit, and she regresses further into her erotic friend fiction, which apparently is just her putting herself into other popular media like Grease or Blade Runner, which honestly isn't too dissimilar to 50 Shades of Grey's relationship with Twilight. Weird. Anyways, this episode's okay. It's a lot of setup. And we know, knowing Tina and the family and the show's dynamics, that she's not going to do anything too crazy. And also the musical number in this episode is surprisingly good. I like a lot of the music in the series, but this one might be a standout for me. 100th on the list, right above L'Independent Woman. Also, that t-shirt is badass. Some Like It Bot Part 2, Judge Bot Day. Here we are, Part 2 of the season finale. Tina is getting ready to put her plan into motion. The plan being to smash an expensive touchscreen with a hammer. It's very sophisticated, the perfect crime. It's a pretty good follow-up to the previous episode, but it's fairly obvious that it's not going to happen. I mean, Tina's not going to get expelled or anything. That'd be a huge shakeup if that were to happen. The family all coming together and finding some peace within themselves is a nice sentiment for the season to go out on. But I can't help but think this probably could have just been tightened up and been a 1-part season finale. Like the Blade Runner scenes they do are super lengthy. Not quite as good as the previous episode, 101st, right below the last. Season review. This season was definitely an interesting one. The quality felt kind of all over the place, and it felt like they were still trying some new story ideas, but then they did some of them twice. Definitely a weird choice. One thing that was cool was if you looked in the background of some episodes, you'll see a bunch of people tripping over the sidewalk outside the restaurant. That's actually kind of a setup for the Bob's Burgers movie, which you should see if you haven't already. A pretty run-of-the-mill season with no episodes that were anything too incredible.